Nintendo 64 DD. When Nintendo first announced the 64 DD, it was hyped as the future of gaming in Japan. This magnetic disk drive add-on for the Nintendo 64 promised bigger games, online connectivity through RANnet, and even creative tools that would let players design their own content. But the reality of its 1999 launch was one of the most infamous disasters in Nintendo's history. Originally planned for 1996, the system had been delayed for years. By the time it finally arrived, gamers were already focused on the Dreamcast and looking ahead to the PlayStation 2. Even worse, Nintendo didn't roll it out through normal retail channels. The 64 DD was initially only available via a RANnet mail order subscription, with extremely limited retail distribution later. That meant most Japanese gamers never even saw it on store shelves. At launch, only a handful of discs were available, and support dried up almost immediately. In total, only 10 official 64 DD titles ever released, leaving early adopters with a machine that felt obsolete right out of the gate. By 2001, Nintendo quietly discontinued the 64 DD. Today, it stands as one of the most notorious examples of a launch gone wrong in Japan, a system that never had a fair chance to succeed. NEC PCFX. In December 1994, NEC launched the PCFX in Japan as the direct successor to the wildly successful PC Engine. Expectations were sky high. After all, the PC Engine had gone toe-to-toe with Nintendo and Sega, and Japanese gamers wanted NEC to deliver another powerhouse. But from the very start, the PCFX stumbled. Its launch lineup leaned almost entirely on full-motion video anime titles, with very little in the way of traditional gaming experiences. Instead of showing off 3D graphics like the PlayStation and Sega Saturn, the PCFX didn't even include a 3D graphics chip at all. That missing feature proved fatal. By the end of 1994, both Sony and Sega were dazzling gamers with polygon-based worlds, while the PCFX was stuck presenting slideshow-style cutscenes. Early adopters were shocked that a next-gen system felt more like a CD player than a gaming console. On top of that, NEC's marketing failed to inspire confidence. They tried to position the system as a multimedia entertainment machine rather than a gaming console, confusing the audience even further. Sales at launch were underwhelming, and momentum never picked up. The PCFX became infamous for being left behind the moment it arrived. A launch so poorly executed that NEC abandoned the console entirely within a few years. Casio Loopy. In 1995, Casio tried to enter the console market with one of the strangest launches Japan had ever seen, the Casio Loopy. Unlike Nintendo, Sega, or Sony, Casio didn't aim for the general gaming audience. Instead, they built a console marketed exclusively to girls, a demographic most major companies weren't targeting at the time. On paper, it was meant to stand out. The Loopy even included a built-in sticker printer, allowing players to take screenshots from games and print them onto adhesive sheets to decorate notebooks, diaries, or school supplies. But while the concept was unique, the launch fell apart almost instantly. The Loopy shipped with a tiny handful of games, and almost all of them were more like interactive dress-up activities or simple storybook experiences than full games. Hardcore players ignored it, and the girls it was meant to appeal to weren't buying it either. On top of that, the system's price wasn't exactly kid-friendly, and parents saw little reason to pay for such a limited device. By the time the holidays ended in 1995, the Loopy was already being cleared from shelves. With only 11 total titles ever released and virtually no buzz at launch, Casio's first, and only, attempt at a console became a forgotten misfire. Bandai Playdia. In 1994, Bandai released the Playdia, a console designed for families and young kids. At first glance, it seemed like an affordable, colorful alternative to the bigger systems of the era. It even came with a wireless infrared controller, a rarity at the time. But from the moment it launched, the Playdia was doomed by its software lineup. Instead of delivering action-packed games or arcade-quality hits, Bandai leaned heavily on FMV-based anime tie-ins and educational discs. For early adopters, that meant the Playdia felt less like a gaming console and more like a cheap interactive DVD player. At launch, its flagship titles were connected to Bandai's massive anime franchises like Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon. But these were essentially glorified choose-your-own-adventure videos or quiz shows offering little in the way of actual gameplay. Kids who wanted real interactive fun were let down, and parents weren't convinced to spend money on a console with so little lasting appeal. Within just a year, the Playdia had all but vanished from shelves. With roughly 36 titles released in total and almost no third-party backing, the system never built momentum. What could have been a fun family alternative instead became one of Japan's most forgettable launches. Hit the subscribe button to stay tuned for more video game explainer videos daily. Sony PSX. When Sony launched the PSX in December 2003, it was marketed as an ultimate all-in-one living room hub. This sleek white set-top box combined a PlayStation 2 with a digital video recorder, DVD burning, and network features. On paper, it looked like the future of home entertainment, but the Japanese launch made clear that Sony had overpromised and underdelivered. The first major problem was price. Depending on the model, the PSX cost between 79,000 and 99,000 yen, several times more than a standalone PS2. Then came the missing features. Sony had advertised broad compatibility and multimedia power, but at launch the system lacked support for CDRs, DVD plus RW discs, and MP3 playback. Some PS2 titles and peripherals, like the multi-tap or games requiring multiple USB ports, didn't work properly either. Buyers paying a premium price felt like they had been sold a half-finished machine. Marketing only made things worse. It wasn't clear whether the PSX was aimed at gamers, home theater enthusiasts, or casual families, and in trying to serve all of them, it satisfied none. Sales in Japan were dismal from the start, and Sony quietly canceled plans for an overseas release. The PSX has since gone down as one of Sony's most infamous failed launches, remembered more as a confusing experiment than a true console. Fujitsu FM Towns Marty. In early 1993, Fujitsu introduced the FM Towns Marty, proudly marketed as the world's first 32-bit home console. That claim should have put it years ahead of the competition, but the Japanese launch quickly showed how a bold idea can collapse when paired with bad execution. The Marty wasn't built as a true next-gen system. It was essentially a stripped-down version of Fujitsu's FM Towns computer line, which meant most of its launch library was just ports of old PC software rather than fresh, cutting-edge games. Then came the price. At 98,000 yen, which was roughly $900 at the time, the Marty cost more than triple what a Super Famicom or Mega Drive did, and even more than the upcoming PlayStation or Saturn. Families walking into stores couldn't justify paying that much for a console with no killer app. Even enthusiasts who might have been interested in next-gen 32-bit graphics were disappointed when they realized the system didn't deliver true 3D polygon power, just prettier 2D and multimedia features. By the end of 1993, the FM Towns Marty had sold only around 45,000 units, far below expectations. Its launch was a perfect example of how being first means nothing if the product isn't affordable or exciting. PC Engine Super Graphics. Hudson Soft and NEC launched the PC Engine Super Graphics in December 1989. Hyped as the true next generation of the PC Engine. It promised more powerful graphics and extra processing muscle, but the launch exposed a brutal problem. There was almost nothing to play. The system debuted with only a single exclusive game, Battle Ace, a technically flashy shooter that wasn't anywhere near a system seller. Meanwhile, Sega and Nintendo were already preparing their own stronger next-gen machines, leaving the Super Graphics in an awkward middle ground. Confusion only made things worse. The console looked nearly identical to the original PC Engine, and most gamers didn't understand what separated the two machines. Retailers struggled to justify the higher price when the cheaper base system already had a thriving library. Even worse, the Super Graphics could still play standard PC Engine games, which gave buyers little incentive to upgrade. In the end, the Super Graphics only received 5 true exclusives across its short life, and none of them gained traction. Japanese gamers quickly realized they were paying extra for a dead-end system. Sales collapsed almost immediately, and the Super Graphics became one of NEC's most infamous failures. Casio PV-1000. Casio's first attempt at entering the console market came in 1983 with the PV-1000, and from the moment it hit Japanese shelves, it was clear the launch was in trouble. The timing couldn't have been worse. Nintendo had just released the Famicom, and Sega had the SG-1000 competing for attention. Both offered strong lineups and more recognizable brands. Casio, known mainly for calculators and watches, simply didn't have the gaming pedigree to earn consumer trust. The PV-1000's biggest issue was its software library at launch. Only a handful of games were available, and they looked primitive compared to what Nintendo and Sega were already delivering. Worse, the hardware was underpowered even by 1983 standards, meaning third-party developers had little incentive to support it. Players who tried the PV-1000 at launch often complained about its clunky controls and lack of compelling experiences. Casio priced the console aggressively to compete, but it didn't matter. Within just months, the PV-1000 was pulled from production, with only 13 games ever released in total. By then, the Famicom was already taking over the Japanese market. The PV-1000's launch is remembered as one of the fastest flameouts in console history, a system that never had a chance against industry giants. Panasonic Q. In December 2001, Panasonic tried to carve out its own piece of the console market by partnering with Nintendo to create the Panasonic Q. At first glance, it was one of the most stylish machines Japan had ever seen, a chrome-plated hybrid that could play both GameCube discs and DVDs, something the standard GameCube couldn't do. The idea sounded perfect for Japanese living rooms, where multifunction electronics were popular, but the launch quickly exposed why the Q would never succeed. The first issue was the price tag. While a regular GameCube cost around 25,000 yen, Panasonic Q launched at almost 40,000. For families who only wanted to play Nintendo games, the extra cost for DVD playback wasn't worth it. Meanwhile, Home theater enthusiasts could buy a dedicated DVD player for far less money. The system sat awkwardly between two audiences and failed to win over either one. On top of that, the GameCube itself was struggling in Japan, which meant the Q inherited all of its parent system's software problems. With no exclusive launch titles and nothing to distinguish its library, buyers didn't see the point. Sales were weak from the start, and within just a couple years, Panasonic discontinued the console entirely. PC Engine LT. By 1991, NEC's PC Engine had cemented itself as one of Japan's most popular consoles, but the company wasn't content to rest. Their next big idea was the PC Engine LT, a clamshell portable version of the system with a built-in color screen. At first glance, it looked like a futuristic laptop for gaming, and on store shelves it absolutely turned heads. But the launch exposed how impractical the machine really was. The LT carried a launch price of 99,800 yen, making it almost 4 times more expensive than a regular PC Engine. That alone limited its audience to only the wealthiest enthusiasts. Worse, despite being marketed as portable, the system didn't actually run on batteries. Owners still had to plug it into an outlet, meaning it was more of a novelty, luggable console than a true handheld. At launch, it also offered no exclusive software. It played the exact same software as a standard PC Engine. Consumers quickly realized they were paying an enormous premium just for a built-in screen. Sales were poor right from the start, and the LT never saw any international release. Today, it's remembered as one of NEC's most extravagant failures, a flashy console with a launch that went nowhere. Have you heard of all these before? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching.